My daughter-in-law drove my son away from me until they shut me out for 15 years. Then my small business exploded, and I purchased a huge mansion. The very next day they showed up. "Hey, Dad, we're moving in since you have all this extra space." What he did next stunned them. Can you imagine being utterly abandoned by your own family for 15 long years? Then, the very day you finally find peace and prosperity, they show up on your doorstep with 12 suitcases, demanding to move into your mansion. They thought I was just a lonely, foolish old man desperate for connection, but they had no idea I was about to teach them the hardest lesson of their lives. What I did next shocked them to their core. My name is Harlan Bennett, but everyone calls me Hank. I'm 70 years old, and I was standing on the limestone balcony of my brand new home in Lake Forest, Illinois. I just sold my landscaping business for a cool $18 million and bought this place, a sanctuary where I could finally enjoy my retirement in peace. I was admiring the sunset, a quiet moment of well-earned satisfaction, when the doorbell rang. I set my drink down, walked through the living room, and pulled open the heavy oak double doors. The air just left my lungs. Standing on my porch was a ghost from my past. 2 ghosts, actually, and a stranger. Logan, my son, looked older than his 42 years, his face etched with something I couldn't quite place. Weariness, maybe. Next to him stood Tiffany, my daughter-in-law, the woman who had single-handedly destroyed my family. She looked exactly the same as the last time I saw her, cold eyes, sharp features, wearing enough designer labels to stock a department store. And behind them, almost hidden in the shadow of a mountain of luggage, was a teenage girl. I stood there, gripping the door handle, my knuckles turning white. I waited. I waited for an explanation. I waited for an apology. I waited for Logan to look me in the eye and say, "I'm sorry, Dad, for missing Mom's funeral. I'm sorry we pretended you didn't exist for a decade and a half." But that's not what happened. Tiffany didn't even say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She simply looked past me, staring into the grand foyer of my house with eyes that held a hungry, calculating gleam. "Well," she said, stepping forward and brushing past me as if I were the doorman. "You certainly hid this well, Hank. I must say I'm impressed. This place is huge. It definitely has enough room for all of us." I was too stunned to move for a second. The sheer audacity paralyzed me. They hadn't spoken to me since the day I buried my wife, Martha. And now here she was, walking into my $4 million sanctuary like she owned the deed. I stepped in front of her, blocking the path to the living room. "Hold on," I said, my voice gravel and rust. I hadn't used it much lately. "You're not coming in here. Get your bags and get off my property." Tiffany stopped. She looked at me with a smirk that made my blood boil. She adjusted her silk scarf and let out a little laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, Hank, stop being dramatic. We're family, and family helps each other. Besides, you're not going to turn us away. Not when your granddaughter is sick." She stepped aside, revealing the girl. Mia. I hadn't seen her since she was 2 years old. She was 17 now, and she looked nothing like the vibrant toddler I remembered. She was pale, ghostly pale. She was shivering in a thin denim jacket, even though it was 50 degrees out. Her eyes were sunken and dark-rimmed. She looked exhausted, beaten down. She looked at me and I saw fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. "Grandpa," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. That single word hit me harder than a sledgehammer. I looked at Logan. He was avoiding my gaze, staring at his shoes, dragging a heavy suitcase up the steps. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. "What is wrong with her?" I asked, my voice hard. "She's just tired," Tiffany said quickly, waving her hand dismissively. "Just a little flu. She needs a warm bed. You're not going to leave your own flesh and blood out in the cold, are you, Hank? Even you are not that cruel." It was a trap. I knew it was a trap. I could see the manipulation in Tiffany's eyes. She was using the girl as a human shield. She knew I was a hard man, but she also knew I had a soft spot for children. She was banking on my decency to override my anger. And God help me, it was working. I looked at Mia again. She swayed slightly on her feet. She looked like she was about to collapse. I stepped back. "Bring her in," I said. "But just her. You two can wait in the car. The driver is waiting for his tip." My son rushed past me, head down, muttering a quick hi. "Dad," that sounded more like a whimper than a greeting. He dragged 3 massive suitcases into my foyer, scratching the floor I had just paid thousands to polish. I watched them invade my space. The smell of Tiffany's overpowering perfume instantly drowned out the scent of old wood and leather that I loved. The peace I had felt 5 minutes ago was shattered. I closed the door. The heavy thud echoed through the massive house. I turned to face them. Tiffany was already inspecting the furniture, running her hand along the back of my Italian leather sofa. "Nice," she said, evaluating it like a pawnbroker. "Real leather. You must have been saving those pennies from cutting grass for a long time, Hank. Did you win the lottery, or did you rob one of your rich clients?" I ignored her. I looked at the clock on the mantel. "You have 30 minutes, I said. Tiffany turned around, eyebrows raised. "Excuse me. You have 30 minutes, I repeated. My voice was calm but dangerous. 30 minutes to explain why I shouldn't call the police and have you trespass from my property. 30 minutes to explain where you have been for 15 years. And if I don't like the answer, you're all leaving." Logan flinched. He looked at Tiffany, waiting for her to tell him what to do. Tiffany just laughed. She actually laughed. She walked over to the sofa and sat down, crossing her legs. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. "You're not going to call the police, Hank," she said confidently. "And do you know why?" My hand inched toward the phone in my pocket. "Because we are all you have," she continued. "Martha is dead. Your friends are all dead or in nursing homes. You're sitting in this big, empty house all by yourself, waiting to die. You need us, Hank. You're lonely. And frankly, you owe us." "I owe you?" I asked quietly. "Yes," she hissed, her mask slipping for just a second. "You owe Logan. He had a terrible childhood, growing up with a father who smelled like fertilizer. You owe him a comfortable life. And now that you finally have some money, it's time to pay up. So be a good father. Go tell the maid, or whoever keeps this place clean, to prepare 3 bedrooms. We're tired, we're hungry, and we're staying." I looked at her, sitting on my couch like a queen. I looked at my son, who was trembling by the door. I looked at my granddaughter, who was slumped against a suitcase, looking like she wanted to disappear. I realized then that they didn't come here to visit. They didn't come to apologize. They came to feed. They were vultures circling a carcass. They thought I was just a lucky old fool who had stumbled into some money. They thought I was weak. They thought 15 years of silence had made me desperate for their affection. They were wrong. I looked at Mia. Her eyes were closed, and she was breathing shallowly. I made a decision right then. I would play their game. I would let the Trojan horse into my walls. Not because I was lonely, not because I was weak, but because I needed to know what they had done to that girl. And because revenge is a dish best served cold. "Fine," I said. "You can stay." Tiffany smiled a triumphant, predatory smile. "I knew you'd see reason, Dad." But I continued, raising a finger. "Only for tonight. Mia looks sick, and I'm not a monster. But this is my house. My rules. And the first rule is simple." I walked over to the wall where I kept the key to the master suite. I took it off the hook and put it in my pocket. "Don't think for 1 second that you can manipulate me, Tiffany. I am not the same man you spit on at the cemetery." I turned to Logan. "Get your daughter some water. She looks like she's going to pass out. And take your shoes off. You're tracking mud on my floor." As Logan scrambled to obey, I saw Tiffany's eyes narrow. She was recalculating. She had expected me to be grateful. She had expected me to be soft. She realized then that this might be harder than she thought. But she had no idea. She had absolutely no idea what I was capable of. I watched them settle in. I watched Tiffany order my housekeeper around as if she paid her salary. I watched Logan shrink into the corners of the room. That night, I lay in my bed, listening to the sounds of strangers in my house. I could hear Tiffany whispering in the hallway. "The old man is senile," she hissed to Logan. "Did you see his hand shaking? He's weak. Give me a week, Logan. Just 1 week. I'll get him to sign power of attorney. We'll have this house and whatever's in his bank account before the month is over." I stared at the ceiling in the dark. My hands were not shaking. They were steady, steady as a rock. They wanted a week. I would give them a week, but it would be the longest week of their lives. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 15 years, I smiled. Not a happy smile. A cold, hard smile. "Welcome home, son," I whispered to the darkness. "Welcome home." The silence in the living room the next morning was heavy enough to crush a man. My son sat on the edge of the leather armchair, his hands clasped between his knees, looking everywhere except at my face. He looked smaller than I remembered, weaker. The expensive suit he wore was wrinkled, and there was a desperate sweat beading on his forehead that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Tiffany was pacing. She moved like a cat in a birdcage, her eyes darting from the crystal chandelier to the oil paintings on the walls, calculating the price of every single item she saw. I stood by the wet bar, my back to them, pouring myself another glass of bourbon. I took my time. The sound of the amber liquid hitting the crystal glass was the only noise in the room. I wanted them to sweat. I wanted them to feel the weight of the last 15 years pressing down on them. When I finally turned around, Logan cleared his throat. He started the speech I knew he had rehearsed in the car. "Dad," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "We've been doing a lot of thinking lately. Life is just so short, you know. After Mom passed, we realized that holding on to old grudges just isn't worth it. We miss you. We want to be a family again. We want to be here for you in your golden years, to take care of you." I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the burn settle in my chest before I answered. I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had raised, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had put through college by working 14-hour days in the sun. And all I saw was a stranger wearing a mask. "Take care of me," I repeated, my voice flat. "Is that what you call it? You didn't seem to care about my golden years when I was sitting alone at your mother's funeral. You didn't care when I spent Christmas staring at a wall." Logan flinched, but Tiffany stepped in, smooth as silk. "Oh, Hank, don't be like that. We were all hurting. We just needed time. But look at us now. We're here. And honestly, seeing you all alone in this big, empty house, it breaks my heart. You shouldn't be alone. It's not safe for a man of your age." I watched her walk across the room. She stopped in the center of the Persian rug I had imported from Turkey. It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship woven by hand. And there she stood, grinding the mud from her designer heels right into the delicate fibers. She didn't even notice. Or maybe she just didn't care. To her, it was just another thing to be used and ruined. I didn't say a word about the rug. I just watched. They thought I was a fool. They looked at my rough hands and my weathered face, and they saw a simple gardener who got lucky. They had no idea that Bennett Landscapes, the company they used to mock, had grown into a behemoth. They didn't know that 2 years ago, a national conglomerate wrote me a check for $18 million to buy me out. They didn't know I still sat on the board of directors. To them, I was just old Hank, who finally dug up a pot of gold in the backyard. I was about to ask them why they really came when a shrill ringing sound cut through the air. It was Logan's phone. He jumped like he had been shot. He fumbled in his pocket, his face draining of color. He pulled out the phone, stared at the screen, and immediately silenced it. "Who's calling you at this hour?" I asked, my eyes narrowing. "It's 8 o'clock at night." "It's nothing," Logan stammered, shoving the phone back into his pocket. "Just a telemarketer. Spam calls. They never stop, right?" I stared at him. I knew that look. I knew that panic. It wasn't a telemarketer. That was the look of a man who was being hunted. I had seen it before, with employees who got in too deep with the wrong people. The phone rang again, insistent, angry. Logan's hand twitched, but he didn't answer it. "It seems like they really want to sell you something," I said dryly. Tiffany shot Logan, a glare that could have peeled paint off the walls. She turned back to me, her smile bright and fake. "Anyway, Hank, this house is truly magnificent. Did you get a mortgage? Interest rates are terrible right now. I hope you didn't get taken advantage of." "I bought it cash," I said. The greedy light in her eyes flared up like a bonfire. "Cash," she breathed. That's wonderful. But you have to be careful. A property like this, the paperwork must be a nightmare. Where do you keep the deed, just for safekeeping? You tend to be a bit forgetful, Dad. We wouldn't want anything important to get lost." There it was. The hook. She wasn't just fishing. She was casting a net. She wanted to know where the heart of the estate was. She wanted to know if I owned it free and clear, so she could figure out how to get her name on it. "It's safe," I said. "Is it?" She took a step closer, invading my personal space. We could help you organize things. Logan is very good with finances. We could take that burden off your shoulders. You shouldn't have to worry about taxes and deeds at 70 years old. I looked at Logan, who was currently sweating through his shirt because his phone was vibrating again. Good with finances. The joke was so bitter I could taste it. I set my glass down on the side table with a sharp clink. I looked over at the corner of the room where Mia was sitting. She had curled up in a ball on the smaller sofa, her eyes closed, shivering slightly, even though the heat was on. She looked so fragile. She was the only reason they were still inside my house. If it weren't for her, I would have thrown them out into the street the moment they walked in. I'm tired, I said abruptly. And Mia needs rest. Tiffany blinked, surprised by the sudden change in tone. Oh, of course. So which rooms are ours? We can take the master suite if it's easier for you, so you don't have to climb the stairs. You'll take the guest rooms down the hall. I cut her off. The ones near the kitchen. And you will stay there. I walked past them, heading toward the hallway that led to my office and the master bedroom. I stopped at the heavy oak door of my study. This was where I kept everything. The deed, the bank statements showing the $18 million, the new will I was drafting with my lawyer. I pulled a key ring from my pocket. I selected a heavy brass key and locked the door with a loud, definitive click. Then I turned to the keypad on the wall that controlled the smart locks for the private wing of the house. Tiffany was watching me, her neck craned, trying to see the code. I stood directly in front of the pad, blocking her view with my broad shoulders. I punched in a new code, one I had just thought of, the date I sold my company. I turned back to them. This wing is off limits, I said. The kitchen is fully stocked. There are towels in the guest bathroom. We will talk in the morning. But Dad, Logan started, standing up. We just got here. We haven't even caught up. We have nothing to catch up on, I said coldly. You are here because your daughter is sick. Don't mistake my hospitality for forgiveness. I looked at Tiffany one last time. She was staring at the locked office door, as if she could burn through the wood with her gaze. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the prize. Good night, I said. I walked into my bedroom and locked that door, too. I engaged the deadbolt. Then I went to the security monitor on my nightstand. I pulled up the camera feed for the living room. I watched them. As soon as I was gone, the act dropped. Logan collapsed onto the sofa, putting his head in his hands. He pulled his phone out and stared at the screen with a look of pure terror. Tiffany didn't comfort him. She didn't check on her daughter. She walked straight to the hallway. She stood in front of my office door. I watched on the screen as she reached out and tried the handle. It was locked. She jiggled it, frustrated. Then she leaned down, peering into the keyhole. I saw her lips move. The camera had a microphone, and I turned the volume up. Old fool, she hissed. He's hiding it in there. I know it. She turned back to Logan. He's paranoid, she whispered loudly. Did you see how his hands were shaking when he used the key? He's losing it, Logan. He doesn't even know what day it is. We just have to play the part. Be the good son. In a week, he'll be eating out of our hands. And if he doesn't, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I knew exactly what she meant. I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the screen. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. They thought they were the predators in this house. They thought I was the prey. They were about to find out that they had walked into a lion's den. And the lion was hungry. The sun was barely up when I walked down the grand staircase of my own home. But the smell of burnt butter and the shrill sound of snapping fingers told me I was no longer the master of this domain. I usually enjoyed a quiet morning, a black coffee, a slice of toast, and the newspaper on the patio. That was my ritual. But as I approached the kitchen, I heard a voice that made my stomach turn. It was Tiffany. She was standing in the center of my kitchen, wearing a silk robe that I suspect she had packed specifically for this moment, looking like she was directing a Broadway play. Mrs. Higgins, my housekeeper, looked close to tears. Mrs. Higgins had been with me since I bought the place. She was a gentle soul, a woman who took pride in her work and knew exactly how I liked my eggs. But right now, she was running back and forth between the stove and the island, flustered and shaking. We are starving, Tiffany declared. I looked at the table. It was piled high with food, fruit platters, pastries, 3 different kinds of juice. It was enough to feed a football team. Yet, there were only 3 of them. Logan was already seated, shoveling food into his mouth as if he hadn't eaten in a week. He didn't even look up to greet me. Mia was sitting at the far end of a table, picking at a piece of dry toast, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. I walked over to Mrs. Higgins and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's fine, Mrs. Higgins," I said softly. "Why don't you take a break? Go tend to the laundry upstairs. I'll handle this." "But, sir," she whispered, terrified. "Go," I insisted. She scurried out of the room, casting one last fearful glance at Tiffany. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the pot on the counter. It was lukewarm. I didn't care. I leaned against the marble island and watched my daughter-in-law. "You treat people with respect in this house, Tiffany," I said, my voice low. "Mrs. Higgins is an employee, not a servant." Tiffany scoffed, grabbing a piece of melon. "Please, Hank, you're too soft. That's why you were a gardener your whole life. You don't know how to demand quality. If you're going to live in a house like this, you need to learn how to manage the staff. Otherwise, they'll walk all over you." She sat down next to Logan and started buttering a croissant. She looked around the kitchen, her eyes landing on the large bay window that overlooked the back garden. It was my favorite view. The landscaping was impeccable, a testament to 40 years of my own hard work and design. There was a majestic oak tree right in the center, framing the view of the lake. "You know," she said, chewing thoughtfully, "that big oak tree out there, it looks like it's seen better days. It's leaning a bit, and I hear a creaking sound when the wind blows. Maybe you could take a look at it. You still have your tools, right?" I stared at her. She wasn't asking. She was ordering. In her mind, nothing had changed. To her, I was still just Hank the laborer, the man who fixed things, the man who got his hands dirty, so she didn't have to. The fact that I owned the roof over her head didn't matter. She assumed my wealth was an accident, but my station in life was permanent. She thought I was there to serve her. Logan finally looked up, sauce dripping from his chin. "Yeah, Dad," he mumbled. "It is pretty loud when the wind blows. Maybe you could take a look at it. You have your tools here, right?" The disrespect was breathtaking. It was so absolute, so casual that I almost laughed. They were sitting in my house, eating my food, and telling me to go do yard work like a hired hand. I set my coffee cup down. "Sure," I said. "I'll go take a look." Tiffany didn't even say thank you. She just turned back to her eggs, complaining that they were getting cold. I walked out the back door into the crisp morning air. The wind was biting, but it felt clean compared to the stifling atmosphere of the kitchen. I walked past the oak tree. I didn't touch a single branch. Instead, I walked to the edge of the property near the tool shed, where I knew they couldn't hear me. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed a number I knew by heart. Joe answered on the second ring. Joe was my former foreman. He had been my right-hand man at Bennett Landscapes for 20 years. He was the only man I trusted completely. "Hank!" Joe's voice was rough and familiar. "Everything okay? You don't usually call this early unless something's on fire." "It's about to be," I said. "They're here, Joe." There was a silence on the line. Then Joe sighed. "The vultures." "Yeah, all of them. And it's worse than I thought. They think I'm senile, Joe. They think I'm a pushover. They're already measuring the drapes." I heard the sound of a lighter clicking on the other end. Joe was lighting a cigarette. "What do you want to do, boss? You want me to come over there and scare him off? I can bring the boys." "No," I said. "That's too easy. I want to teach them a lesson. I need you to do me a favor. I need you to play a role. Name it." "I need a script, Joe. They think I have money. Well, they know I have money because of the house, but they don't know about the sale. They don't know about the 18 million. I want them to think this is all a house of cards. I want them to think I'm over-leveraged. I want them to think I'm broke." I heard Joe chuckle. A low, dark sound. "You want to play the poor old man card?" "Exactly. I'm going to call you back in 5 minutes. When I do, I'm going to be shouting. I'm going to be panicking. You just need to be the guy on the other end telling me the bad news. Tell me the bank is calling. Tell me the investment's crashed. Tell me the IRS is knocking. Just make it sound bad." "Got it," Joe said. "I'll be the Grim Reaper. Give him hell, Hank." I hung up. I stood there for a moment, looking at my beautiful house. I had bought this place to be a sanctuary. Now it was a stage. I took a deep breath, mussed up my hair a little to look frazzled, and dialed Joe's number again. I waited until the counter hit 3 seconds. Then I started screaming. "What do you mean, frozen?" I yelled at the empty air, walking quickly back toward the patio doors. I burst into the kitchen. The phone pressed to my ear, my face a mask of pure panic. "Joe, you have to stop them," I shouted, making sure my voice carried to the dining table. "I can't lose this house. I just bought it." The room went silent. The fork halfway to Logan's mouth froze. Tiffany spun around in her chair, her eyes wide. I paced back and forth in front of the island, ignoring them, focusing entirely on my performance. "What do you mean the bank is calling the loan?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fake desperation. "I paid the deposit. I thought I had more time, Joe. Listen to me. You have to move the funds from the other account." "What do you mean there's nothing left in the other account?" I stopped pacing. I leaned against the counter as if my legs had given out. I let the phone slide down a little, breathing heavily. "Next week," I whispered, loud enough for them to hear. "They're coming to seize the assets next week. Joe, I have family here. I can't be on the street. Not again." I listened to the silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds. Then I slowly lowered the phone. I stared at the floor, letting my shoulders slump. I looked up at them. Logan was pale. He looked like he was about to vomit up his expensive breakfast. He had come here looking for a lifeboat, and I had just told him the ship was sinking. But Tiffany didn't look scared. She didn't look worried for me. She didn't look concerned that her father-in-law was about to lose his home. I watched her face carefully. I saw the gears turning. Her eyes narrowed, shifting from me to the expensive appliances, calculating. She wasn't looking at a tragedy. She was looking at an opportunity. Her face smoothed out into a mask of concern. But I saw the spark in her eyes. It was greed. Pure, unadulterated greed. She wasn't thinking about saving me. She was thinking about what she could grab before the bank took it all. "Oh, Hank," she said softly, standing up and walking toward me. "Is everything okay?" "Who was that?" I looked at her, and I knew the trap was set, and she had just walked right into it. I left the kitchen with the weight of the world, apparently, on my shoulders, walking slowly, and stooped over as if the news of my financial ruin had physically broken my spine. I muttered something about needing to find documents, and headed toward the hallway that separated the main living area from the guest wing. But as soon as I turned the corner, out of their sight, I straightened up. My step became silent and sure. I was not a man defeated. I was a hunter who had just laid a trap, and now I needed to see if the prey had taken the bait. I knew exactly where they would go. The guest suite I had assigned them was the furthest one down the east corridor, a large room with thin walls if you knew where to listen. I bypassed my office and slipped into the linen closet next to their room, leaving the door cracked just an inch. It was a trick I had used when raising Logan, catching him sneaking out at night. I never thought I would have to use it 40 years later to protect myself from him. The voices started almost immediately. They were hushed, but angry. The sound of desperate people realizing their lifeboat had a leak. "We have to go, Logan." That was my son, his voice pitching up in that whiny tone he used when things got hard. "Did you hear him on the phone? The bank is coming next week. If we stay here, we're going to get dragged into his mess. They might come after our assets, too, if they think we're connected. We came here for a free ride, not to pay off a bankrupt old man's debts." I waited for the response. I waited for Tiffany to agree to pack her Louis Vuitton bags and run back to whatever hole they had crawled out of. But I had underestimated her greed. Her voice was not scared. It was cold and sharp, like a butcher knife hitting a cutting board. "You are an idiot, Logan," she hissed. "Keep your voice down. Do you think I dragged us all the way here just to leave because of one phone call? Think for a second. If the bank is seizing the house next week, that means we have 7 days. 7 days where he's still the legal owner. 7 days where he's panicked, confused, and desperate. What does that matter?" Logan argued. "Zero is zero, Tiffany. If the house is gone, the money is gone. He's 70 years old." Tiffany snapped. "He's confused. He probably has other assets he's forgotten about, or accounts the bank hasn't frozen yet. And more importantly, he has insurance." I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I leaned closer to the crack in the door, holding my breath. "Life insurance," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A man like Hank definitely has a policy. Probably a big one from when he owned that landscaping company. If he loses everything and the stress becomes too much, well, old men have heart attacks all the time, don't they?" I stood in the dark linen closet, My hands clenched into fists so tight my fingernails dug into my palms. They were not just talking about money anymore. They were weighing my life against a payout. "But Dad isn't stupid," Logan said, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice, though not nearly enough of it. "He might not sign." "He will sign," Tiffany replied with terrifying confidence. "He's scared, Logan. Did you see him shaking in the kitchen? He's terrified of being poor again. We just have to push him a little harder. Make him feel like we're his only salvation. And if he resists, well, there are ways to make an old man compliant. I have some things in my bag that can help him sleep. Help him relax. If he's a little groggy, he won't read the fine print." The silence that followed was deafening. My son did not object. He did not defend me. He did not say that drugging his father was a line he wouldn't cross. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, but we have to do it fast." "We'll do it tonight," Tiffany said. "Go make nice with him. Tell him we're here to support him. I'll call that lawyer friend of mine, Rick. He'll draft the papers for a fee. We'll get it done over dinner." I had heard enough. I stepped back from the door, moving silently on the plush carpet. My heart was not racing anymore. It had slowed down into a steady, heavy rhythm. The grief I had felt earlier, the tiny lingering hope that maybe my son still had a shred of decency in him, was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They wanted to play games with my life. They wanted to drug me and rob me. Fine. I would not kick them out. Kicking them out was too easy. It was too merciful. If I threw them out now, they would just go find another victim. No, I was going to let them stay. I was going to let them think they were winning right until the moment the trap snapped shut. I walked back toward the main foyer, my face composed, my mind racing with plans. I needed to call my lawyer. I needed to secure the perimeter. But first, I needed to get some air. I turned the corner near the grand staircase and nearly collided with a small figure. It was Mia. She jumped back, her eyes wide and terrified. She was clutching a ragged backpack to her chest, as if it contained all her worldly possessions. She looked like a ghost haunting my hallway. I stopped. I softened my expression, trying not to look like the vengeful patriarch I felt like inside. "Mia," I said gently, "I didn't see you there. Are you all right?" She looked around frantically, checking the stairs, checking the hallway behind me. She was trembling. She took a step closer to me, invading my personal space in a way that told me she was desperate. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice barely a breath of wind. "You have to be careful." I frowned, leaning down to her level. "What do you mean, honey?" "Mom," she said, tears welling up in her large, dark eyes. "She has the pills, the blue ones. She used to give them to Grandma Ellie before she went to the home. She puts them in the tea." My blood ran cold. Grandma Ellie was Tiffany's mother. I remembered her passing away a few years ago. Everyone said it was natural causes, a peaceful slip into dementia, and then death. Now, looking at the terror in my granddaughter's eyes, I wondered just how natural it had been. "She talks to Dad about it," Mia continued, the words tumbling out of her fast and quiet. "She says you're confused. She says you need help resting, but you don't, Grandpa. You're sharp. I see it. Please don't drink the tea. Please don't sign the papers." She looked over her shoulder again, terrified that her mother would appear. "They're going to send me away," she choked out, a sob escaping her throat. "Once they get the money, they said they're going to send me to a boarding school in Arizona. A bad one, for troubled girls, just to get me out of the way." I reached out and placed my hands on her shoulders. They were thin and frail under my grip. I looked her in the eye, and for the first time in 15 years, I let the mask drop completely. I let her see the strength that had built an empire. "Mia, listen to me," I said, my voice low and fierce. "Nobody is sending you anywhere. Nobody is hurting you, and nobody is drugging me. Do you understand?" She blinked, tears spilling over her lashes. "But Mom, your mother has made a mistake," I said. "A very big mistake. She thinks she's the wolf in this house, but she is not." I pulled a handkerchief from my pocket and handed it to her. "Wipe your eyes, child. Go back to your room. If they ask you, we were never here. Can you do that for me? Can you act like everything is normal for just a little while longer?" She nodded, wiping her face with the linen square. "I think so." "Good," I said, straightening up. "Because we're going to play a game, you and I. And when it's over, you're never going to have to be afraid of them again." I watched her scurry up the stairs, clutching my handkerchief like a lifeline. I touched the pocket where I kept my phone. Tiffany wanted to drug me. She wanted to strip the carcass. I walked toward my office to make a call. It was time to introduce Tiffany to the concept of consequences, and I was going to make sure they were catastrophic. I walked back into the living room, my heart pounding with a cold fury that I had to fight to keep off my face. The house was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. I found Tiffany in the sunroom, lounging on a chaise with a glass of my best Chardonnay in her hand, while Mia was on her knees scrubbing the floorboards with a rag. It was a scene that made my blood boil. Here was a woman who had just plotted to drug her father-in-law, treating her own daughter like Cinderella before the ball. "Mia, you missed a spot," Tiffany said without looking up from her phone. "Use some elbow grease. God knows you're going to need the practice if we can't fix this mess." I cleared my throat loudly. Tiffany jumped, spilling a drop of wine on her silk blouse. She glared at me, but quickly composed her face into that mask of fake concern. "Oh, Hank," she said. "You startled me. Shouldn't you be resting? You looked so pale earlier." "I'm feeling a bit lightheaded," I lied, leaning heavily on the door frame. "My chest feels tight. I think I need to go to the pharmacy to pick up my prescription. The stress, you know." Tiffany's eyes lit up. The mention of my failing health was music to her ears. "Well, you certainly shouldn't drive," she said, taking a sip of wine. "Logan can go." "No," I said, shaking my head. "Logan doesn't know what to get. It's a compound medication, very specific. I have to sign for it, but I don't trust myself behind the wheel right now. My hands are shaking." I held up a hand and let it tremble just enough to be convincing. Tiffany sighed, clearly annoyed that her relaxation was being interrupted. "Well, I'm not going. I have a headache." I looked at Mia, who was still on the floor, her head down, trying to make herself invisible. "Mia can drive me," I said. "She has her license, doesn't she?" Tiffany scoffed. "Barely. She's a terrible driver. But fine, take her. Just be quick about it. And Mia, don't bore your grandfather with your teenage drama. He has enough to worry about with the bank coming." Mia stood up, wiping her red, raw hands on her jeans. She looked at her mother with a mixture of fear and resentment, but she grabbed the keys I held out without a word. We walked out to the garage. I ignored the shiny luxury sedan Tiffany and Logan had arrived in and walked straight to the back corner where a dusty tarp covered a large shape. I pulled the tarp off, revealing my 1997 Ford F-150. It was dented, scratched, and smelled like gasoline and pine sawdust. It was the truck I had built my business in. It was the only honest thing in this garage. Mia looked at it with wide eyes. "Get in," I said, opening the passenger door. "It runs better than it looks." We drove out of the estate in silence. The truck rumbled and shook, a stark contrast to the smooth ride of modern cars. But to me, it felt like freedom. I drove for about 10 minutes, until we were well away from the house, parked in a secluded overlook near the lake. I killed the engine. The silence of the woods surrounded us. Mia was staring out the window, chewing on her thumbnail. A nervous habit I remembered my own mother having. "You can talk now," I said gently. "She isn't here. There are no cameras, no listening devices, just us." Mia let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. She turned to me, and the dam broke. She didn't just cry, she wailed. It was the sound of a child who had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders for far too long. I reached across the console and pulled her into a hug. She buried her face in my flannel shirt, smelling of Old Spice and sawdust, and cried until there were no tears left. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were swollen. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," she hiccuped, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "I'm just so tired." "Tell me," I said. "Tell me everything. Not the lies your mother tells. The truth. Why are you really here?" She took a shaky breath. "We lost everything," she whispered. I nodded. "I figured that part. The house, the cars, the vacation home, the boat, all of it," Mia said. "Dad got into crypto. He thought he was a genius. He leveraged everything. Then the market crashed. He lost millions in a week, but he didn't stop. He tried to win it back. Gambling, online poker, sports betting. He dug the hole deeper and deeper." "And your mother?" I asked. "She spent money we didn't have to keep up appearances," Mia said bitterly. "She bought clothes she couldn't afford, threw parties on credit cards that were maxed out. She said we had to look rich to stay rich. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. It was exactly what I expected from them. Vanity and stupidity, a lethal combination. But that's not the worst part, is it? I asked, looking at her. You said something about them sending you away. Mia froze. She looked down at her hands, twisting a loose thread on her jeans. They owe money, Grandpa. Bad money. To a man named Mr. Henderson. He's a loan shark in Chicago. They owe him $500,000. $500,000. It was a fortune to most people, but to me, it was a number I could write a check for right now without blinking. Mr. Henderson is scary, Mia continued, her voice trembling. He came to the old house before we lost it. He threatened Dad. He said if he didn't get his money, he would take something else. She paused, and a fresh wave of tears spilled over. He has a son. His name is Vinny. He's 25. He's been in jail twice. Mr. Henderson said. He said if Dad couldn't pay, he would accept a trade. My stomach dropped. I felt a nausea, so intense I almost opened the door to be sick. A trade? I repeated, my voice hollow. Mia whispered. He wants me to marry Vinny. He said it would merge the families, settle the debt. Mom said it was a good match. She said Vinny is rich. She said I should be grateful to help the family. They brought me here to hide me until the wedding arrangements are made. They want your money to pay off the rest of the debts, so they can start over. But the deal with Henderson, that stands. I stared at the windshield, seeing nothing but red. My son, my own flesh and blood. He wasn't just a failure. He wasn't just a thief. He was a monster. He was willing to sell his 17-year-old daughter to a criminal to save his own skin. And Tiffany, the woman who claimed to be a mother, was orchestrating it. I felt a rage I didn't know I was capable of. I wanted to drive back to the house, walk into the living room, and tear them apart with my bare hands. I wanted to burn the world down. But I looked at Mia. She was shaking, terrified, waiting for me to tell her there was nothing I could do. Waiting for me to be just another adult who failed her. I took a deep breath, forcing the red mist to recede. Anger wouldn't save her. Smart action would. I reached out and took her hand. My hand was calloused and rough. Hers was small and soft. Mia looked at me. She raised her eyes. That is not going to happen, I said. My voice was low, steady, and hard as granite. Nobody is selling you. Nobody is marrying you off to some thug over my dead body. But the debt, she whispered. Let me worry about the debt, I said. I have resources they don't know about. I have friends they can't imagine. But to fix this, to really fix this and make sure they can never hurt you again, I need you to be strong. I'm not strong, she said. I'm just scared. Scared is good, I told her. Scared keeps you alert. But I need you to turn that fear into a weapon. We're going to play a game, Mia. A very dangerous game. I need you to go back into that house and pretend. Pretend you're the obedient daughter. Pretend I'm just a confused old man losing his mind. Can you do that? She hesitated. Why? Because if they think they're winning, they'll get sloppy, I explained. They'll make mistakes. And when they do, I'll be there to catch them. I'm going to destroy them, Mia. Not physically. I'm going to destroy their greed. I'm going to strip them of every lie they've told. But I need time. I squeezed her hand. Are you with me? Mia looked at me. For a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who used to chase butterflies in my garden. But then her expression hardened. She looked at the dashboard of the truck, then back at me. I saw a spark of anger ignite in her eyes. It was the first sign of life I had seen in her since she arrived. They sold my car, she said, her voice quiet but firm. It was a Honda. I saved up for it working at the diner. They sold it to pay for the plane tickets here. She took a deep breath and nodded. I'm with you, Grandpa. Let's get them. I started the engine, the truck roaring to life with a defiant growl. Good girl, I said, shifting into gear. Now, let's go buy some vitamins and pretend they're heart medication. We have a performance to give. As we drove back toward the house, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the road. I felt the weight of the task ahead of me. It wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't just about my house. It was about saving this girl's life. And God have mercy on anyone who stood in my way, because I certainly wouldn't. I dropped Mia off at the side entrance of the estate, watching her slip back inside like a shadow before I turned my truck toward the city. The drive to downtown Chicago usually took an hour, but I made it in 45 minutes. My mind was racing faster than the engine. I needed ammunition. If I was going to go to war with my own flesh and blood, I needed to know exactly what kind of weapons they were carrying. Victoria Sterling was the kind of lawyer who could make a grown man cry with a single raised eyebrow. She had handled the sale of my company 2 years ago, negotiating the $18 million deal without breaking a sweat. When I walked in wearing my flannel shirt and work boots, the receptionist didn't even blink. She knew exactly who I was. "Hank," Victoria said, standing up from behind her massive mahogany desk. She didn't offer a handshake. She just pointed to the chair. "You look like a man who is about to bury a body. Coffee or scotch?" "Coffee," I said, sitting down heavily. "Black. And I'm not burying a body, Victoria. I'm trying to stop one from being buried. Mine." I told her everything. I told her about the surprise visit, the manipulation, the plan to drug me, the loan shark, the threat to Mia. Victoria listened in silence, her face a perfect mask of professional detachment, but I saw her knuckles turn white as she gripped her pen. When I finished, she opened a thick file folder on her desk. "I thought you might need this," she said, sliding the folder toward me. "When you called me yesterday and asked me to run a background check on Logan, I put my best investigator on it immediately. Hank, it's worse than you think." I opened the folder. The first page was a mugshot. It was Logan, but younger. "What is this?" I asked, my voice steady. "But Hank, that's just the beginning." She flipped the page. "Currently, there's a warrant for his arrest in Florida. Credit card fraud, identity theft. He's been moving from state to state, running a Ponzi scheme with cryptocurrency investors. He's not just a bad businessman, Hank. He's a criminal, and he's desperate." I looked at the papers. My son, the boy I taught to fish, the boy I carried on my shoulders. He was a con artist, a thief. And now he was in my house, targeting me. "And the debt?" I asked, closing the folder. "The $500,000 to the loan shark." "It's real," Victoria said. "The man is Henderson. He fronts as a legitimate private lender, but he's mob-connected. He bought Logan's debt from 3 different casinos and consolidated it. He's aggressive, Hank. If Logan doesn't pay, Henderson will hurt him. Or anyone close to him." I sat back in the chair, staring out the window at the gray Chicago skyline. I felt old, older than my 70 years. I felt the weight of every sacrifice I had ever made for my family. And I felt the bitter sting of betrayal. They didn't come to me for help. They came to me to bleed me dry. But then I thought of Mia. I thought of her terrified eyes in my truck. I thought of the deal they had made to sell her off like cattle. I leaned forward. My sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, tactical rage. "Who holds the paper on the debt now?" I asked. "Henderson," Victoria said. "Through a shell company called Zenith Holdings." "Buy it," I said. Victoria blinked. "Excuse me. I want you to call Henderson's people," I said, my voice hard as iron. "I want you to buy the debt. Offer them full value, cash. Today. I want the transfer of ownership signed and delivered to me by tomorrow morning." "Hank," Victoria warned, "that's $500,000. You're basically paying off his gambling debts." "No," I corrected her. "I'm not paying it off. I'm buying it. I want to be the one holding the leash. If Henderson owns the debt, he controls Logan. If I own the debt, I own Logan. And if I own Logan, I can crush him. Legally." Victoria stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, shark-like smile spread across her face. "You want to be his creditor?" "I want to be his nightmare," I said. "Do it, Victoria. Use the emergency fund. Make the call." I left the office an hour later with a copy of the dossier tucked under my arm. I felt lighter. I had a weapon now, a nuclear option. They thought they were playing checkers, but I had just bought the chessboard. I drove back to Lake Forest, the sun dipping low on the horizon. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked peaceful. The lights were on, casting a warm glow on the manicured lawn. It looked like a happy home. It was a lie. I entered through the garage, trying to be quiet. I wanted to get to my office to lock away the dossier before anyone saw me. I crept down the hallway, my boots making no sound on the runner. The door to my office was ajar. I froze. I had locked it. I was sure I had locked it. I stepped closer, peering through the crack. Tiffany was inside. She was standing by my desk, rummaging through the drawers. She had managed to pick the lock. Or maybe she had found a spare key I had forgotten about. She was moving frantically, tossing papers aside, looking for something specific. I watched her for a moment. She looked desperate, sweaty. The cool, arrogant woman from yesterday was gone, replaced by a frantic scavenger. She stopped suddenly, her hand closing around a small orange pill bottle on my desk. Her eyes lit up. She held it up to the light, reading the label. "Got you," she whispered. I stepped into the room. "Looking for something, Tiffany?" I asked, my voice booming in the small space. She spun around, gasping and nearly dropping the bottle. She clutched it to her chest, her face going pale, then flushing red. "Hank," she stammered. I didn't hear you come in. I was looking for a pen to leave you a note." "A note?" I repeated. "In my locked office, inside my desk drawer." "The door was open," she lied smoothly, recovering her composure. "And I found these." She held up the pill bottle. It was a bottle of high-potency multivitamins I took for my joints. But the label was faded, and unless you read the fine print, it looked like serious medication. "Dioxin," she read, mispronouncing the brand name, intentionally or not. "This is for heart failure, isn't it, Hank?" I stopped. I looked at the bottle, then at her. I saw the calculation in her eyes. She wanted me to be sick. She needed me to be sick. It fit her narrative. If I was dying, if my heart was failing, then my confusion and weakness were explained. It made me an easier target. I decided to give her what she wanted. I sighed, letting my shoulders slump. I reached out a trembling hand. "Give me that, Tiffany," I said, my voice wavering. "I don't like people knowing. It's just a little condition. The doctor said I have to be careful. Stress is bad for me." Tiffany's smile returned. It was predatory. She handed me the bottle, her fingers brushing mine. Her skin was cold. "Oh, Hank," she cooed, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Why didn't you tell us? We've been so worried. You seem so frail lately, so forgetful, leaving doors unlocked, getting confused about money. It all makes sense now. Your heart isn't pumping enough blood to your brain, is it?" I looked down at the floor, hiding the disgust in my eyes. "Maybe," I muttered. "Maybe I am getting worse." Tiffany placed a hand on my arm. She squeezed it gently, like a snake testing the size of its meal. "You shouldn't be managing all this alone, Dad," she said, using the word dad like a weapon. "The stress of the house, the bills, the bank calling. It's going to kill you. Literally. You need rest. You need someone to take the burden off your shoulders." I looked up at her, feigning hopelessness. "I don't know what to do, Tiffany. The bank called again. They said I have to sign some papers, or they'll take the house tomorrow." I was lying, of course. Joe hadn't called back, but Tiffany didn't know that. "Tomorrow," she gasped, her eyes widening. "Oh, God. Okay. Hank, listen to me. We can fix this. I know what to do." She pulled her phone out of her pocket. "I have a friend," she said quickly. "A very good lawyer. His name is Rick. He specializes in asset protection for seniors. I called him earlier, just in case. He's in the area. I can have him come over tonight. Right now." "Tonight?" I asked, backing away a little, acting overwhelmed. "That seems fast. I'm tired, Tiffany. Can it wait?" "No," she insisted, stepping forward, crowding me. "It cannot wait, Hank. If you don't act tonight, you will lose everything. Rick can draw up some papers, simple papers, just to put the assets in a trust, or assign a guardian to handle the legal battles for you, so you can rest. Wouldn't you like to rest, Hank? Wouldn't you like to sleep without worrying?" I looked at the vitamin bottle in my hand. I looked at her hungry eyes. She had the lawyer on speed dial. This Rick was probably part of the scam. He was coming to help them steal my life. I let out a long, shaky breath. "I suppose so," I said quietly. "If you think it'll help." "It will save you," she promised. "I'll call him. You go wash up. Dinner is almost ready. We'll sign everything after dessert. It will be a celebration, the start of your new peaceful life." She hurried out of the room, phone already to her ear, not even bothering to close the door she had broken into. I stood there alone in my office. I tightened my grip on the vitamin bottle until the plastic creaked. Rick was coming. Good. Let him come. I had a dossier in my hand that proved my son was a felon. I had a lawyer buying their debt. And now I had them exactly where I wanted them. They thought they were bringing in the closer to finish me off. They were just bringing another fly into the web. I walked over to my safe, hidden behind a painting of the Chicago skyline. I punched in the code. I placed the dossier inside, right next to the deed of the house. I checked my watch. It was 6 o'clock. Showtime. I walked out of the office, leaving the door open just like she had left it. I headed to the kitchen, ready to play the role of a lifetime. The senile, dying old man who was about to sign his life away. Little did they know, the pen I would be using was filled with poison, and I was writing their obituary. Rick arrived at 7:30 sharp, carrying a leather briefcase that looked more expensive than his car. He was a small man with shifting eyes and a smile that showed too many teeth. He smelled of cheap cologne and stale tobacco smoke, the kind of scent that clings to people who spend too much time in back rooms making deals they shouldn't. Tiffany greeted him at the door like he was a long-lost brother, kissing his cheek and whispering something in his ear that made him nod and glance toward the kitchen where I was sitting. I was ready. I had spent the last hour practicing in the mirror. I let my jaw go slack. I stooped my shoulders until my back ached. I'd stopped shaving, leaving patches of gray stubble on my chin. When they walked into the dining room, I was staring blankly at a bowl of mashed potatoes, my hands trembling just enough to make the silverware rattle against the china. "Hank, this is Rick," Tiffany said, her voice loud and slow, like she was talking to a toddler. "He's the friend I told you about, the lawyer. He's here to help us with the paperwork." I looked up, blinking slowly. "Rick!" I muttered. I thought we were playing cards. Where's the deck?" Rick chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "No cards tonight, Mr. Bennett. Just a few signatures. We want to make sure your assets are safe from that nasty bank, don't we?" We sat down to dinner. It was a surreal affair. Tiffany had ordered takeout from a high-end steakhouse, plating it on my fine china to make it look homemade. She poured wine for everyone except me. For me, she poured a glass of water and set the bottle of vitamins next to it, making sure Rick saw it. "See," she whispered to him. "He's on a strict regimen. His heart is basically a ticking time bomb." I decided it was time to ramp up the performance. I reached for the salt shaker and let my hand spasm, knocking it over. Salt spilled across the mahogany table. "Oh, clumsy me," I mumbled. Then I looked directly at Logan. He was cutting his steak with a savagery that betrayed his anxiety. He hadn't looked me in the eye since he arrived. I saw Tiffany kick Logan under the table. She was smiling, a triumphant, wicked smile. She leaned toward Rick and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "See, it comes and goes. Some days he doesn't even know what year it is. It's dementia, Rick. Rapid onset. We need to get this done before he forgets his own name." Rick nodded, pulling a thick stack of documents from his briefcase. He pushed aside his half-eaten steak and spread the papers out on the table. They were dense, filled with legal jargon, emergency guardianship, durable power of attorney, revocable living trust. It was a death warrant for my freedom. If I signed these, I would legally become a child in the eyes of the state. They would control my money, my medical decisions, my residence. They could throw me in a state-run nursing home the next morning and sell this house before lunch. "Just a few formalities, Mr. Bennett," Rick said, uncapping a heavy fountain pen. "We call this a medical registration. It just tells the doctors that Tiffany and Logan can pick up your prescriptions. That's all standard procedure for men of your condition." I looked at the papers. I looked at the pen. I let my hand hover over the signature line, shaking violently. "I don't know," I said, my voice wavering. "This looks like a lot of pages for a prescription." "It's just government red tape, Hank," Tiffany said, her patience thinning. "Just sign it. The bank is coming tomorrow, remember? If you don't sign this, they'll take the house and you'll be on the street. Do you want to sleep under a bridge?" "Oh." I looked at her with wide, fearful eyes. "No. No bridge. I like my bed." "Then sign," she hissed. I took the pen. I brought the tip down to the paper. "Wait," I said, pulling back. "If I sign this, can I stay here? You won't make me leave, will you? I promised Martha I would stay." Tiffany rolled her eyes. She looked at Rick, who shrugged. "Of course you can stay, Dad," Logan said, his voice cracking. "We just want to help." "You are lying," I thought. "You are lying through your teeth." I lowered the pen again. I made a mark, a shaky line that looked nothing like my signature. Tiffany leaned over the table. Press harder, Hank, and write your full name. Harlan Bennett. Stop shaking. I looked up at her, feigning confusion. Who's Harlan? I'm Hank. Sign the damn paper, you senile old fool. Tiffany shouted, slamming her hand on the table. The room went deadly silent. Rick looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Even Logan looked shocked by her outburst. That was the signal. Mia, who had been sitting silently at the end of the table, stood up. She was holding a large pitcher of ice water. Her hands were shaking too, but not from acting. She was terrified, but she caught my eye, and I gave her the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. She walked toward me, ostensibly to refill my glass. As she passed behind Rick and Tiffany, she tripped. It was a beautiful performance. She flailed her arms, and the pitcher flew from her hands. Ice water, gallons of it, cascaded onto the table. It soaked the tablecloth. It soaked the steak. And most importantly, it soaked the stack of legal documents, turning the ink into a running, blurry mess. Oh no! Mia cried, putting her hands to her mouth. I'm so sorry. I tripped on the rug. Tiffany shrieked. She jumped up, brushing water off her silk dress. She looked at the ruined papers, sodden and tearing under the weight of the water. Her face turned a color I'd never seen before. A deep, violent purple. You stupid little brat, she screamed. She didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She swung her hand back and slapped Mia across the face. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Mia stumbled back, clutching her cheek, tears instantly springing to her eyes. I froze. The acting stopped. The shaking in my hand stopped. The fog in my eyes cleared instantly. For 1 second, just one heartbeat, I was not the senile old man. I was Harlan Bennett, the man who had built walls with his bare hands. The man who had fired men twice his size for disrespect. I stared at Tiffany with a cold, murderous rage. I wanted to leap across the table and throttle her. I wanted to end the charade right now and throw them all through the window. Tiffany saw it. She saw the change. She took a step back, her eyes widening in sudden fear. She saw the lion behind the mask. But I caught myself. It was too soon. If I broke character now, I would lose the war just to win a battle. I needed the final blow. I needed witnesses. I forced my body to slump back down. I forced my hands to start shaking again. I looked at the wet papers and started to whimper. My water, I cried. You spilled my water. Tiffany blinked, confused by the sudden shift. She looked from me to Mia, who was now sobbing quietly in the corner. Look what she did, Rick said, trying to salvage the situation, though he looked wary. The papers are ruined. I'll have to draft new ones. I don't have a printer here. Tiffany turned on Mia, pointing a finger at the door. Get out. Get to your room before I really give you something to cry about. Mia ran. She caught my eye one last time before she fled, and I saw the apology there. I wanted to tell her she was a soldier. I wanted to tell her she had just saved us. Tiffany turned back to me, breathing heavily. It's fine. It's fine, Rick. Go back to your office. Print them again. Bring them back in an hour. We'll do this tonight. No, I said. Tiffany spun around. What did you say? No, I repeated louder this time. I'm tired. The yelling. It hurts my head, and the water is everywhere. I can't sign wet papers. I stood up, leaning heavily on the table. We'll do it tomorrow, I said. Tomorrow is too late. Tiffany argued, stepping into my path. No, it isn't. The bank comes on Monday. Tomorrow is Saturday. I want to have a party. A party? She asked, incredulous. Are you insane? A housewarming party, I said, letting a goofy smile spread across my face. I never had one. If I'm going to lose the house or sign it to you, I want one last night. I want to invite my friends. You don't have any friends. Tiffany spat. I have Joe, I said, and the boys from the shop. Invite them tomorrow night. We'll have a big dinner, and then I'll sign in front of everyone. A ceremony. Yes, that would be nice. A passing of a torch. I saw the gears turning in her head. She hated the idea. She wanted it done now, but she also saw an opportunity. A public signing. Witnesses. If I signed the papers in front of a crowd, nobody could claim later that she had coerced me in a dark room. It would legitimize her theft. She looked at Rick. He shrugged. It might actually be better, he said. It makes it harder to contest later if there are witnesses. Tiffany sighed. She looked at me with pure venom. Fine, she said. One party, tomorrow night. But you invite your trashy friends, and I'll invite some real people. People who matter. We'll show them that the Bennett family is back on top. But Sunday morning, Hank, you sign everything. Or, so help me God, I will put you in a home so fast your head will spin. I smiled a vacant, watery smile. Okay, Tiffany. Sunday morning. I shuffled toward the hallway, leaving them in the wet ruin of the dining room. But inside, I was calculating. She was going to invite people who matter. Perfect. I wanted an audience. I wanted every single person she tried to impress to see exactly what she was. She had slapped my granddaughter. That was the last mistake she would ever make in this house. I walked to my room, locked the door, and pulled out my phone. I dialed Joe. It's on, I said, my voice steady and cold. Tomorrow night. Tell the boys to come, and tell them to bring their work clothes. We have a show to put on. I poured my coffee black and retreated to the corner, watching her. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a fraud alert from my bank. A charge for $12,000 at a high-end catering company. Another for $5,000 at a liquor distributor. And another for $3,000 at a florist. She had stolen my credit card. I must have left my wallet on the counter the night before during the water pitcher incident, and she had swiped the numbers. A younger man might have been furious. He might have stormed over there and demanded an explanation. But I just cleared the notification and put the phone back in my pocket. Let her spend it. Every dollar she stole was another nail in her coffin. It was grand larceny now. She wasn't just a bad daughter-in-law. She was a felon in the making. I listened to her on the phone, inviting people. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming smooth and cultured, a complete fabrication of the woman she actually was. Yes, darling, she purred into the receiver. It's a passing of the torch ceremony, really. Hank is finally stepping down. He's handing the estate and the family assets over to Logan and me. It's tragic, of course, his mind is going, but we want to honor him while he still recognizes faces. You simply must come. I took a sip of coffee, hiding my smile behind the mug. She was selling tickets to her own execution. I finished my drink and slipped out the back door. I had my own calls to make. I walked down to the edge of the lake, where the water lapped gently against the stones. I dialed Joe again. It's tonight, Joe, I said. You sure about this, boss? Joe asked. His voice sounded worried. I don't like seeing you play the fool, Hank. It doesn't sit right with me. It's the only way, Joe, I told him. Listen to me carefully. I need you and the crew here at 7 o'clock sharp, but I don't want you cleaning up. What do you mean? Joe asked. I mean, I want you to come straight from the shop, I said. Don't shower. Don't change. I want sawdust in your hair. I want paint on your pants. I want you to smell like diesel and hard work. Wear your work boots, the muddy ones. There was a silence on the line. Hank, this is a party in Lake Forest. They're going to look at us like we're trash. Let them look, I said, my voice hardening. That's the point. I want them to see the difference between people who build things and people who steal things. Just do it, Joe, and bring the big screen, the one we use for safety presentations. Joe sighed. All right, Hank. We'll be there, looking like a construction site disaster. I hung up. The stage was being set. I spent the afternoon playing the part of a confused old man. I wandered through the house, getting in the way, asking the caterers if they had seen my glasses, even though they were on my face. Tiffany treated me with a mix of condescension and irritation, pushing me into the library like an unwanted piece of furniture. Just sit there and watch TV, she hissed. And for God's sake, put on a suit later. A nice one. Don't embarrass us. When the coast was clear, I went to the ballroom. Yes, the house had a ballroom. It was a ridiculous room with high ceilings and a stage at one end that I never used. But today it was perfect. The caterers were busy setting up round tables with white linens in the garden, so the ballroom was empty. I set up the projector Joe had dropped off at the service entrance earlier. I connected it to the sound system, hidden behind a velvet curtain. I tested the connection with my phone. The video file was queued up. The audio was crisp. I hid the remote control and the flower arrangement on the podium. It was a simple trap, but the best ones always are. As evening approached, the house transformed. It smelled of expensive perfume and roast duck, masking the scent of the wood and stone I loved. I went to my room and put on my best suit. It was 20 years old, a charcoal gray wool that was slightly out of fashion, but it was clean, and it was mine. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see a victim. I saw a judge. Night fell, and the cars started arriving. I stood at the bottom of the stairs for a moment, just watching them. These were the people Tiffany wanted to impress. Sharks in silk suits and women with faces so tight they looked surprised to be alive. They were drinking my liquor and laughing at jokes that weren't funny. None of them knew me. None of them cared about Harlan Bennett, the man. They were here to witness the transfer of wealth. They were here to see the old lion finally lay down and die so the scavengers could eat. Tiffany spotted me immediately. She broke away from a conversation with a woman wearing enough diamonds to sink a ship and rushed over to me. She gripped my arm with a strength that was surprising. Her nails dug into my jacket sleeve. Finally, she hissed through her teeth while keeping a wide, fake smile plastered on her face. Try not to drool on anyone, Hank. Just wave and smile. And when we get to the stage, you read the cards I put in your pocket. Do not deviate from the script. I looked at her. She was vibrating with adrenaline and greed. She looked beautiful in a terrifying way, like a poisonous flower in full bloom. I'll do my best, Tiffany, I said, keeping my voice shaky. I just want everyone to be happy. Good, she said, patting my cheek with a condescending tap. Then do exactly what you're told. She steered me into the room, parading me around like a prized poodle. She introduced me to people whose names I forgot the second they said them. This is my father-in-law, she would say. He's so frail now, but we're doing everything we can to make his final years comfortable. The guests would nod sympathetically, looking at me with pity before turning back to their champagne. Then the atmosphere changed. It started as a low rumble outside, a vibration that rattled the delicate glassware on the tables. The guests stopped talking, looking toward the front windows. The rumble grew louder, accompanied by the distinct sound of heavy tires crunching on gravel. Headlights swept across the living room, cutting through the dim mood lighting. A horn honked. Not a polite luxury car beep, but the deep air horn of a heavy-duty work truck. Tiffany froze. Her grip on my arm tightened until it hurt. "What on earth is that?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I just watched the front door. The door swung open, and the silence in the room was absolute. Standing in the entryway, framed by the night, was Joe, and he had brought the cavalry. Behind him were 6 of my best guys, men who had been with Bennett Landscapes for decades. They were not wearing tuxedos. They were wearing Carhartt jackets stained with grease. They wore work boots caked with dried mud. They had sawdust in their hair, and the smell of diesel fuel and hard work clung to them like cologne. They looked glorious. They walked into the foyer, their boots thudding heavily against the marble. They looked out of place in the sea of black ties and evening gowns, like bears walking into a tea party. The guests gasped, clutching their pearls and stepping back as if the men were carrying a contagious disease. Tiffany let go of my arm and marched toward them. Her face was a mask of pure fury. She stopped 3 feet in front of Joe, looking him up and down with an expression of utter disgust. "What do you think you are doing?" she demanded, her voice shrill in the quiet room. "Who let you in here? Deliveries are around the back." Joe took off his baseball cap and held it in his hands. He looked at Tiffany calmly, not intimidated in the slightest. "We're not here for a delivery, ma'am," he said, his voice deep and steady. "We're here for the party. Hank invited us." Tiffany let out a laugh that sounded like a bark. "Invited you? Look at you. You're tracking filth onto my floor. This is a black tie event, not a monster truck rally. Get out right now, before I call the police." Joe didn't move. He looked past her, directly at me. "We're friends of the family," Joe said. "Friends." Tiffany scoffed, turning to the room so everyone could hear her indignation. "These are not friends. These are employees. They are the hired help, and clearly they don't know their place." She turned back to Joe, pointing a manicured finger at the door. "Get out!" she screamed, losing her composure completely. "You are ruining the atmosphere. You smell like a gas station. Go around the back if you want a plate of leftovers, but get out of my sight." The room was dead silent. Every eye was on Tiffany. Her cruelty was on full display, naked and ugly. She wasn't the sophisticated hostess anymore. She was a mean-spirited bully yelling at working men. I saw Logan standing near the bar, looking mortified, but he didn't say a word to stop her. He just swirled his drink and looked at the floor. It was time. I stepped away from the wall. I dropped the stoop on my shoulders just a fraction. I walked toward the door, my steps a little steadier than before. "Tiffany!" I said, my voice carrying through the room. She spun around, her face red. "Hank, tell these people to leave. They're embarrassing us." "They are my guests," I said. Tiffany glared at me, her eyes wide with warning. "Hank, remember the papers. Remember the bank. Do not test me." She turned to the crowd, flashing that fake apologetic smile again. "I'm so sorry, everyone. My father-in-law, his mind isn't what it used to be. He tends to associate with the lower elements. He doesn't understand that there are standards for an evening like this." She looked back at Joe with a sneer. "Please forgive him," she said to the room, pointing at Joe as if he were a stain on the carpet. "He spent his life digging in the dirt. It's hard to wash that kind of stink off." The insult hung in the air. It was a slap in the face to every man who had ever earned a living with his sweat. Joe's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, respecting the plan. I walked past Tiffany and stood next to Joe. I put my hand on his shoulder. His jacket was rough under my fingers, familiar and grounding. "Come in, Joe," I said loud and clear. "There's plenty of food. Grab a drink." Tiffany looked like she was going to explode. She opened her mouth to scream again, but she caught the look in my eye. For a second, she saw something there that scared her. She shut her mouth, her chest heaving. "Fine," she hissed, leaning in close to me, so only I could hear. "Let the trash stay, but you're going to pay for this, Hank. Now get on that stage and finish this. I want those papers signed in 10 minutes. She stomped away, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and downing it in one gulp. She signaled to the band to stop playing. "All right, everyone," she announced, clapping her hands and regaining her spotlight. "If we could all gather in the ballroom, we have a very special presentation. My father-in-law has an announcement to make about the future of the Bennett estate." The crowd murmured and began to move toward the ballroom. I nodded to Joe. He winked at me. He signaled the boys, and they filtered into the room, standing along the back wall, a silent line of flannel and denim against the velvet wallpaper. I walked toward the stage. The ballroom was dimly lit, the chandeliers turned low to focus attention on the podium. A large screen had been set up behind it, ostensibly for a slideshow of family photos. Tiffany stood at the bottom of the stairs, holding a blue leather folder, the transfer documents, the guardianship papers, the keys to my prison. She smiled at me as I approached, but her eyes were cold as ice. "Don't mess this up, old man," she whispered as I passed her, "or I promise you the nursing home I pick will smell worse than your friends." I climbed the stairs. My legs felt heavy, but not from age. They felt heavy with the weight of what I was about to do. I reached the podium and gripped the sides, though it felt solid under my hands. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the strangers looking at me with mild curiosity. I saw Logan standing near the front, looking like he wanted to disappear. I saw Mia hiding in the shadows near the back, her eyes wide and terrified. And I saw Tiffany standing right below me, looking up with a mixture of triumph and impatience, holding the pen that was supposed to seal my fate. I took a deep breath. I reached into my pocket, but I didn't pull out the note cards Tiffany had written for me. I left them there. I leaned into the microphone. It squealed slightly, then settled. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I said, my voice scratching a little. "It's good to see so many expensive faces." A few people chuckled nervously, thinking it was a joke. "My daughter-in-law, Tiffany, went to great lengths to bring you all here," I continued, looking down at her. "She wanted you to witness something important. She told you this was a passing of the torch. She told you I was going to sign over my legacy to her and my son." Tiffany nodded encouragingly, gesturing for me to get on with it. "And she is right," I said. "I am going to show you something. But I think there has been a misunderstanding about what my legacy actually is. You see, Tiffany thinks legacy is about houses and bank accounts. She thinks it's about what you can take." I paused. The room went very quiet. Tiffany's smile faltered slightly. "But I built my life on something else," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I built it on truth. And tonight, I think we are overdue for some truth." I reached under the podium, and found the small remote control I had hidden there earlier. My thumb hovered over the button. I looked at Tiffany one last time. She was frowning now, sensing that the script had gone off the rails. She took a step toward the stairs. "Hank," she warned in a loud whisper. "Read the cards." I ignored her. "I invited you all here to see the future of the Bennett family," I said to the crowd. "But before we look forward, we have to look at the present. I want to show you exactly who is inheriting my empire." I pressed the button. The lights in the ballroom dimmed completely, leaving only the glow of the massive screen behind me. "I want to show you the real legacy of the Bennett family," I said. And then the video started to play. The massive screen behind me flickered to life, but instead of a heartwarming montage of family photos set to sentimental music, the ballroom was suddenly filled with grainy, high-definition footage of my kitchen from 3 nights ago. The audio was crystal clear, amplified by the expensive sound system Tiffany had rented. Her voice, shrill and cruel, cut through the elegant atmosphere like a serrated knife. On the screen, a digital timestamp ticked in the corner, proving exactly when this had happened. The guests watched in stunned silence as the Tiffany on the screen paced back and forth, a glass of wine in her hand, pointing a finger at my empty chair. "He's useless," she spat on the video, her face twisted in a sneer that looked monstrous at this size. "The old fool should have died sooner. He's just taking up space. Once we get the signature, we dump him in that state facility off the highway. The cheap one. He won't know the difference. He'll probably be dead in 6 months anyway without his meds." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The women in their diamonds put hands to their mouths. The men in their tuxedos shifted uncomfortably, looking from the screen to the real Tiffany standing at the foot of the stairs. But the video didn't stop there. It cut to the scene in the linen closet, the conversation I had overheard. "We strip the carcass before the vultures land," the recorded voice of Tiffany hissed. "We sell everything, the furniture, the art. We leave him with nothing." Then came the final clip, the dinner scene from the night before. The image was sharp. Everyone saw Mia trip. Everyone saw the water spill. And then, with a clarity that was sickening, everyone saw Tiffany swing her arm back and strike her own daughter across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the ballroom, a sharp, cracking noise that made several people jump. "You stupid little brat," the on-screen Tiffany screamed. I pressed the button on the remote again, and the screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The jazz band had stopped playing. The waiters had stopped serving. 50 pairs of eyes were fixed on Tiffany Bennett. She stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs. Her face had drained of all color, leaving her makeup standing out like war paint on a corpse. She opened her mouth to speak, but for the first time in her life, she had no words. She looked around the room, searching for an ally, searching for someone, anyone who would look at her with anything other than revulsion. She found no one. Even her high society friends were looking at her as if she were something they had stepped in on the sidewalk. Logan was staring at the floor, his shoulders hunched up to his ears, wishing the ground would open up and swallow him whole. I let the silence hang for another 10 seconds. I let it weigh on them. Then I stepped away from the podium. I straightened my back. The stoop I had been faking for days vanished. The trembling in my hands ceased instantly. I stood at my full height, 6 feet and 2 inches of hard-earned muscle and bone. I buttoned my jacket with steady fingers. I looked down at them from the stage, and I didn't look like a confused old pensioner anymore. I looked like the man who had commanded crews of hundreds. I looked like the man who had built an empire from dirt. "You thought I was old," I said. My voice didn't waver. It didn't scratch. It boomed through the microphone, deep and resonant, filled with the power that I had been holding back for 15 years. "You thought I was feeble," I continued, walking slowly to the edge of the stage. "You thought because my hands are rough and I wear work boots that I was stupid. You looked at me, and you saw a victim." I pointed a finger at Tiffany. She flinched as if I had thrown a stone at her. "You stood in my kitchen and called me useless," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "You planned to drug me. You planned to lock me away in a warehouse to die so you could buy more handbags. And you struck my granddaughter in my house." I took a breath, letting the rage fuel me but keeping it controlled. "I built this life with these 2 hands," I said, holding them up. "I worked 14-hour days in the rain and the snow. I built walls that still stand 40 years later. I planted trees that are now taller than this house. Do you really think a man who can do that is easy to trick? Do you really think I didn't see you for exactly what you are? Tiffany finally found her voice. It was a desperate, screechy thing. It's a fake, she yelled, pointing at the blank screen. It's deep fake technology. He doctored it. He's crazy. He's senile. Don't you see? He's trying to humiliate us. I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Stop lying, Tiffany, I said. It's over. The performance is done. I reached into my inside jacket pocket. I didn't pull out the note card she had written. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a bank statement. You told everyone here that the bank is coming to take this house, I said, addressing the crowd. You told my son that we were broke. You used my fear to try and manipulate me into signing over my rights. I unfolded the paper and held it up. This house is not being foreclosed on. I bought this estate 3 months ago. I paid $4.2 million, and I paid in cash. A murmur went through the crowd. I heard someone whisper, "Cash," in the back. I sold Bennett Landscapes 2 years ago, I announced, watching the blood drain further from Logan's face. I sold it for $18 million. I am not broke, Tiffany. I have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes, even with your habits. Logan looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock and a sudden, sickening realization of what he had thrown away. 18 million, he mouthed the words, but no sound came out. But you, I said, turning my gaze to my son. You are a different story, aren't you? I reached into my pocket again and pulled out the dossier Victoria had given me. I tossed it down the stairs. The papers fanned out at Logan's feet. I know about the crypto, Logan, I said. I know about the gambling. I know about the arrest in Nevada. I know about the warrant in Florida. I took a step closer to the edge of the stage, looming over them. And I know about the $500,000 you owe to a man named Henderson. Tiffany let out a small, strangled sound. She looked at Logan, who was shaking his head frantically, tears streaming down his face. The secret they had been willing to sell their daughter to keep was out. You came here to hide, I said, my voice filled with disgust. You didn't come to care for me. You came to use me as a shield. You thought you could strip my assets to pay your debts. You thought you could sell this house, sell my dignity, and maybe even sell my life to save your own skins. I looked out at the crowd of wealthy strangers. This is the legacy you came to see, I told them, gesturing to the cowering couple on the floor. This is what greed looks like when it takes off its mask. It is ugly. It shouts. It is desperate. And it is weak. I turned back to Tiffany. She looked small now. The arrogance was gone, stripped away by the harsh light of the truth. She looked like a cornered rat. You wanted a show, I said. You wanted a passing of the torch. Well, here it is. I am not passing anything to you. Not a penny, not a single blade of grass from this property. I looked at Joe, standing by the door with his crew. He was grinning, his arms crossed over his chest. He gave me a thumbs up. I looked at Mia, who had crept out of the shadows and was standing near the kitchen door. She was watching me with wide awe. She wasn't scared anymore. She looked proud. I'm done playing the fool, I said. And I'm done with you. The room was electric with tension. Nobody moved. They were witnessing a public execution of character, and they couldn't look away. But I wasn't finished. I had one more card to play. The ace in the hole. Tiffany seemed to realize that she had lost the audience, but not all hope. She tried one last desperate pivot. She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes. Tears that I knew she could summon on command. Hank, please, she sobbed, trying to sound like a victim. We were desperate. We made mistakes, but we're family. You can't embarrass us like this. We did it for the family. We owe bad people, Hank. They will kill us. You have $18 million. You have to help us. You are my father. I stared at her. The audacity was truly bottomless. I am not your father, I said coldly. And after tonight, I am not even your father-in-law. I signaled to the back of the room. Victoria Sterling, my lawyer, stepped out from the shadows where she had been waiting. She walked through the silent crowd, carrying a briefcase. She looked like an executioner in a pantsuit. She walked up to the stage and handed me a document. You are right about one thing, Tiffany, I said, holding the paper up. You do owe bad people. Or at least you did. I looked at the paper, then back at them. You don't owe Henderson anymore. Tiffany blinked, hope sparking in her eyes for a second. You paid him? No, I said, a dark smile crossing my face. I didn't pay him for you. I bought the debt. The hope vanished, replaced by confusion, and then absolute terror. I own your debt now, I said. I own the paper. I own the interest, and I own the collateral, which means effectively I own you. I let that sink in. I watched the realization wash over them. They weren't dealing with a loan shark anymore. They were dealing with me, and I was much, much less forgiving. Now, I said, we are going to negotiate, and this time, I am the one making the rules. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Tiffany let out a scream that sounded less like a human being and more like a wounded animal trapped in a snare. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She attacked. She lunged toward the stage, her hands curled into claws, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. She moved with a speed born of total desperation, knocking over a waiter and sending a tray of champagne flutes crashing to the floor. You have $18 million, she shrieked, her voice cracking with the strain. 18 million. 500,000 is nothing to you. It's pocket change. You are my father-in-law. You have to save us. It's your duty. You cannot hold this over our heads. You owe us. She tried to scramble up the stairs to the stage, but she didn't make it. Joe stepped forward. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, a wall of muscle and denim blocking her path. She slammed into him and bounced off. She tried to go around him, but two of the other guys from the shop stepped in, forming a human barricade. She stood there panting, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. She looked at the crowd of wealthy guests, who were now watching her with open disgust. She looked at Logan, who was weeping silently on the floor. And then she looked at me. You are a monster, she spat. You are evil. You bought our debt just to torture us. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at her. I bought the debt to stop you from selling my granddaughter, I said calmly. Victoria Sterling stepped forward. Then she opened the briefcase she was holding, and the sound of the latches clicking open echoed in the silent room. She pulled out a thick document, bound in blue legal paper. She walked down the stairs and held it out toward Tiffany, not letting her touch it, just showing her the signature line. Let us be very clear about the legal standing here, Mrs. Bennet, Victoria said, her voice projecting effortlessly to the back of the room. Mr. Bennet did not pay off your debt as a gift. He purchased the promissory note from Zenith Holdings. He owns the principal. He owns the interest. And since the note was already in default when he acquired it, he has the right to call in the full amount immediately. Victoria paused, letting the words sink in. That means you owe him $542,000, including penalties, Victoria continued. And you have exactly 0 days to pay it. Tiffany stared at the paper, her hands shaking uncontrollably. We can't pay that, she whispered. We don't have it. I know, I said from the stage. And since you cannot pay, I have options. I can seize your assets. I can garnish your future wages. I can ensure that you never own a credit card or a bank account again. I leaned into the microphone. But there is more, I said. I have video evidence of you conspiring to commit elder abuse. I have evidence of you discussing drugging me. I have evidence of you attempting to defraud a senior citizen. And I have records of you stealing my credit card to pay for this party. I pointed to the police officers who were standing quietly at the back of the room, waiting for my signal. That is 5 to 10 years in a state penitentiary, Tiffany, I said. For both of you. Conspiracy, fraud, assault. Logan looked up at the mention of prison. His face was gray. He looked like a man who was watching his life end in slow motion. Dad, please, he whimpered. I can't go to jail. I won't survive in jail. Then listen closely, I said, because I am only going to offer this once. I signaled to Victoria. She pulled another document from the briefcase. This one was shorter, just 2 pages. I am willing to forgive the debt, I said. I am willing to wipe the slate clean. I will not press criminal charges for the credit card theft. I will not hand over the video of the abuse to the district attorney. Tiffany looked up, hope warring with suspicion in her eyes. What do you want? She asked. What do you want, Hank? I want Mia, I said. The room went still. Mia, who was standing by the kitchen door, took a step forward, her hand covering her mouth. I want you to sign over full legal custody of Mia to me. I continued, my voice hard as steel. You are unfit parents. You were willing to trade her to a loan shark to save yourselves. You struck her in my home. I will not allow her to be in your care for one more second. Tiffany opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. And I want you gone. I want you to sign a restraining order. You will not come within 100 miles of this house. You will not contact Mia. You will not contact me. You will leave the state of Illinois, and you will never come back. That is the deal, I said. Your freedom for my granddaughter. Tiffany stared at me. Her eyes darted to Mia, then back to the paper. She was calculating. I could see it. She was weighing the value of her daughter against the value of her own skin. You can't ask us to give up our child, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. It sounded hollow. It's extortion. It's a rescue operation, I corrected her. I looked at Logan. He was the weak link. He always had been. Logan, I said, the police are waiting. They have seen the video. They are just waiting for me to say the word. If you walk out that door in handcuffs, you will go to a holding cell tonight. With your record, you won't get bail. Logan scrambled to his feet. He looked at Tiffany, then at the document in Victoria's hand. He didn't look at his daughter. He didn't even glance at her. Give me the pen, he said. Tiffany gasped. Logan, what are you doing? I am not going to jail, Tiffany, he shouted, his voice shrill with panic. I am not going to jail for you. I am not going to jail for this. Give me the pen. He snatched the pen from Victoria's hand. He didn't read the document. He didn't ask about visitation rights. He didn't ask if Mia would be taken care of. He just threw the paper onto a nearby table and scribbled his signature, so hard the pen tore through the page. There, he panted, backing away, his hands held up in surrender. I signed it. I signed it, Dad. I gave her up. I gave her to you. Just let me go, please. Just let me go. I looked at my son. In that moment, any lingering affection, any last shred of hope I had for him died. He wasn't a father. He was a coward. He had just sold his only child to save himself from the consequences of his own greed. I looked at Mia. She was crying, silent tears streaming down her face. But she wasn't looking at Logan with sadness. She was looking at him with realization. She was finally seeing him clearly. She was seeing that he would never protect her. I turned my gaze to Tiffany. She was staring at her husband with a look of absolute betrayal. Not because he had given up their daughter, but because he had saved himself without her. You coward, she hissed at him. You spineless, pathetic coward. Sign the paper, Tiffany, I said, my voice booming, or you go to jail alone. And trust me, the women in there won't care about your designer shoes. She looked at the police officers, who took a step forward. She looked at the guests who were filming the entire scene on their phones. She looked at the wreckage of her social climbing dreams. She snatched the pen from the table. She looked at Mia one last time. There was no love in her eyes. There was only resentment. Resentment that Mia was the cause of her downfall. Fine, she spat. Take her. She's ungrateful anyway. She deserves you, Hank. You deserve each other. She signed the paper with a violent slash of ink. She threw the pen at Victoria. Are you happy now? She screamed at me. You won. You stole my life. I didn't steal anything, I said calmly. I just took out the trash. Victoria picked up the documents, checking the signatures. She looked up at me and nodded. It was done. It was legal. Mia was safe. Now get out, I said. Logan didn't wait to be told twice. He bolted for the door, running past the guests, running past Joe, running away from his responsibilities like he had done his whole life. Tiffany stood there for a moment longer, shaking with rage. She looked at the crowd, trying to find some scrap of dignity to wrap around herself, but she found none. She turned and marched toward the door, her head held high in a grotesque parody of pride. But before she could leave, Joe stepped into her path one last time. He held out a plastic garbage bag. Your luggage is on the lawn, ma'am, he said deadpan. We didn't want it cluttering up the hallway. She let out a shriek of frustration and pushed past him, disappearing into the night. The door slammed shut behind her. The sound echoed through the ballroom, final and absolute. Silence descended on the room again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It felt clean. It felt like the air after a thunderstorm. I walked down the stairs. My legs felt a little weak now that the adrenaline was fading. I walked straight past the guests, past the lawyers, past the workers. I walked to Mia. She was standing there clutching her elbows, looking at the door where her parents had just vanished. She looked small and broken. I knelt down in front of her, ignoring the pain in my knees. I took her hands. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I'm sorry you had to see that." She looked at me. Her eyes were full of tears, but there was a light in them, too. A light of freedom. "They didn't even say goodbye," she whispered. I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight, shielding her from the stares of the room. "They didn't deserve to say goodbye," I told her. "You are safe now, Mia. You are home. And this time, nobody is ever going to make you leave." I stood up, keeping my arm around her shoulders. I looked at the crowd of stunned socialites in my ballroom. "The party is over," I announced. "Go home." I turned my back on them and walked my granddaughter toward the kitchen. We had a lot of work to do. We had to heal. We had to rebuild. But for the first time in 15 years, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like a fortress, and we were the ones holding the keys. The party guests had scattered like cockroaches the moment the uniforms stepped forward, their expensive cars peeling out of the gravel driveway in a desperate rush to distance themselves from the scandal. But Tiffany didn't get that chance. She had made it as far as the front gate, dragging her garbage bag of clothes when the officers intercepted her. I stood on the porch, watching the scene unfold with a heavy heart, but a clear conscience. She was screaming, of course. She was thrashing against the officer who was trying to put her in the back seat. Her designer dress tearing at the seam, her mascara running in black streaks down her face. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, her voice raw. "I signed the papers. He said he wouldn't press charges. He lied." I walked slowly down the steps, my boots crunching on the stone. I stopped a few feet away from the cruiser. Victoria Sterling stood beside me, calm and terrifyingly efficient. "I told you I wouldn't press charges for the credit card theft, Tiffany," I said, my voice cutting through her hysterics. "And I won't. I'm a man of my word. But the video of you striking a minor, striking your own daughter, that is not a financial crime. That is assault. And the threats against a senior citizen, the conspiracy to commit involuntary commitment, the state takes that very seriously. I didn't have to press charges for that. The district attorney saw the tape. That decision belonged to the state of Illinois." She looked at me through the window of the police car, her face pressed against the glass, her eyes wide with a terror that was finally, satisfyingly real. For the first time, she wasn't looking at a mark or a victim. She was looking at the consequences of her own cruelty. As the car pulled away, disappearing into the darkness, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a profound sense of relief, like a fever breaking after a long sickness. The infection was gone, but there was still one loose end. Logan was sitting on the curb near the fountain, his head in his hands. He looked like a child who had lost his mother at the grocery store. He was shivering, not from the cold, but from the shock of his reality crumbling. He had no wife, no daughter, no money, and nowhere to go. I walked over to him. I didn't offer him a hand up. I stood over him, my shadow stretching long across the grass. He looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't think she would go that far. I didn't. I was scared," he stammered. "I know," I said. "You've been scared your whole life, Logan. You were scared of work. You were scared of responsibility. You were scared of her. And tonight, when you had a chance to save your daughter, you were scared of prison. So you sold her." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a roll of cash. It was a few hundred. I tossed it onto the ground next to him. "This is for a bus ticket," I said, "and a cheap motel. It's more than you gave me when you kicked me out of your life 15 years ago." He stared at the money, then at me. "Dad, please. Where am I supposed to go? I have nothing." "You have your health," I said. "You have 2 hands. You have a brain, even if you refuse to use it. Go somewhere where nobody knows the name Bennett. Get a job, a real job. Wash dishes, dig ditches, learn what it means to earn $1 instead of stealing it." I turned my back on him. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every instinct in my body as a father wanted to fix him, to save him, to pick him up and dust him off. But I knew that saving him now would only destroy him later. He needed to hit the bottom. He needed to break so he could rebuild himself if he had it in him. "Do not come back, Logan," I said over my shoulder. "Do not show your face here until you have learned how to be a human being." until you have learned what honor means. And looking at him, huddled on the curb, reaching for the cash with shaking hands, I thought that day might never come. And I had to make peace with that. I walked back into the house. The silence of the foyer was broken by a sudden, raucous cheer from the kitchen. I followed the noise. In the kitchen, the atmosphere was transformed. The stiffness of the party was gone. Joe and the crew had taken over. They had raided the oversized refrigerators and found the beer stash. They were sitting around the marble island, their boots up on the expensive stools, eating pizza they had ordered themselves because the fancy hors d'oeuvres weren't enough to feed a working man. When I walked in, Joe stood up and raised a beer bottle. "To the boss!" he shouted. "The toughest son of a gun in Lake Forest." The boys cheered, clinking bottles. I smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached my eyes. This was my crowd. These were my people. Mia was sitting in the corner on a high stool. She was holding a slice of pepperoni pizza, and for the first time in a week, she was eating like a teenager. She looked up when she saw me. She put the pizza down and hopped off the stool. She didn't say anything. She just ran across the kitchen and slammed into me, wrapping her arms around my waist and burying her face in my chest. She was shaking, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was the release of 1,000 pounds of pressure. I hugged her back, resting my chin on the top of her head. I held her tight, letting her know that the walls around us were solid, that the ground beneath us was steady. "It's over," I whispered to her. "It's all over." She looked up at me, her face wet with tears, but her eyes were clear. "Thank you, Grandpa," she said. "You saved me. We saved each other, kid," I told her. Joe walked over and clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You did good, Hank," he said quietly. "You did real good, but you know this house is too big for 2 people. You're going to need some noise in here. Maybe a few dogs. Maybe a workshop in the back." I looked around the massive kitchen. It was ridiculous. It was ostentatious. But it was ours. "Yeah," I said. "I think we need a dog, maybe 2. And definitely a workshop. I can't let these hands get soft." The night wore on, filled with stories and laughter. The crew told Mia embarrassing stories about my early days in the business, about the mistakes I made, the walls I built crooked, the times I fell into mud pits. She laughed, a genuine, bell-like sound that filled the empty spaces of the mansion. Later, Mia and I sat on the back patio, wrapped in blankets against the chill. We looked out at the moonlight on the water. "Mia," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Yeah, Grandpa. You know, $18 million is a lot of money," I said, looking out at the water. "But money is tricky. It can rot you from the inside if you don't respect it. You saw what it did to your parents. They thought money was a substitute for character." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "I don't want to be like them," she whispered. "I don't want to be greedy." "I know," I said. "That's why I have a proposition for you." She looked at me, curious. "I'm not going to just give you this money," I said. "I'm not going to write you a check and let you drift. That would be the worst thing I could do. But I am going to give you something better." I turned my chair to face her. "Bennett Landscapes was my life's work," I said. "I sold the name, but I didn't sell the knowledge. I didn't sell the skill. I'm thinking of starting something new. Something small, maybe a design firm, maybe a restoration company. I'm 70, but I'm not dead yet." I saw a spark of interest in her eyes. "I need a partner," I continued. "Someone smart. Someone who can learn the ropes. Someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. I can teach you, Mia. I can teach you how to build something from nothing. I can teach you how to read a contract, how to manage a crew, how to look a client in the eye and shake their hand. I can teach you how to run a business with honor." I leaned forward. "Do you want to learn?" Mia looked at me. She looked at the lake. She looked at the massive house behind us. Then she smiled. It was the smile of a Bennett. Determined, resilient. "Yes," she said. "I want to learn. Teach me everything." I patted her hand. "We start tomorrow," I said. "We start at 6 a.m. And wear boots." We sat there for a while longer, watching the moonlight on the water. I thought about Logan, somewhere out there in the dark, learning his own hard lessons. I hoped he would find his way, but I knew I couldn't walk the path for him. I looked at Mia, my second chance, my legacy. They say you can't choose your family. That's a lie. You're born with blood relations, sure. But family? That is a choice. It is built on respect. It is built on loyalty. It is built on showing up when the chips are down. My son and his wife, they shared my name, but they weren't my family. They were strangers who shared a bloodline. But the girl sitting next to me, and the men who had shown up in their work boots to defend my honor, that was family. And as I sat there, breathing in the cold night air, for the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel alone. I felt home. So, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand with family? Let me know in the comments below. I'd really love to hear your thoughts.